like you guys are super professional, and it's really going to be great. So, oh, I got a message here being live streamed. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to leave the meeting if it's live streamed. Don't worry. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about today that's really relevant to what we do, apart from the more produced or compositional music that I do, I had a few years ago, I started something I called Sample the World. That was just me having fun and realizing that I can actually use any sound around me with a little camera and a good, like, nice microphone to make music out of it. I think when you do these things, there's two ways to go about it. I feel like a lot of times it can go in a very ambient way, where you kind of capture a long sound of maybe outdoors, a beach or a field, and you can make kind of more ambient sound of it. And there's also a side of a more musical and kind of chopping things into little pieces and putting it together into something more kind of quick or like more rhythmic. And that was the kind of thing that I'm more drawn into. And luckily we have this software called Ableton Live, which is really only limited by our imagination. And I'm not sponsoring them or anything. I'm not sponsored by them. I really truly love this software, and I feel like it really gives the freedom to do so much if you just know a little bit how to kind of deal with it. And it's almost like a musical instrument in the way that you just have to know it really well and use it almost like muscle memory when you do your little tricks that I'm going to show you today. And it just opens up a world of options and opportunities that really left me in awe when I learned this. So first of all, I actually want to show you that video, the specific one with the hummus, because that is actually my favorite thing in the world of except music. So that was my favorite Sample the World video as well. I made a bunch. I think there were like 5 or 6 of those in different places in my hometown and home country, in some Italy, Spain. But I think the one that I enjoyed the most was this one. So in Israel, there's tons of hummus places, and each person has their own most favorite hummus place that they would swear by, and like that's the only one that you should go to. And that's, so it's always a big battle. I don't know if in India there's a specific food that goes like that. You guys should tell me. Maybe biryani, I don't know. I love Indian food, by the way, as well. So basically, there are so many nice, cool places. And this specific place that I went to has also like a record label and stuff like that. So they're very connected with music, and they let me in the kitchen and let me just hang out there for a full day, film some small segments, and made music like with basically everything that we had there. So I'm going to show you the samples as well of the videos and how they eventually turned into music and what I had to do to make that. So let's start first with just seeing the video itself. I'm going to share the screen here and let me know that this one is visible. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. And let me know if there's any trouble seeing or hearing it, but I think it should be good to go. All right, and this is the video. It's pretty short. All right. So everything you've seen and heard here was all made from the videos that I took there, except the guitar, because I'm a guitarist, so I had to have like one element that is out of that. But everything else, the bass, the kick, the drums, the percussion kind of stuff, and some of it you can see actually in the video, which was important to me. Everything was sampled there and kind of tweaked to make the music. By the way, if you have any questions at any point, you can feel free to kind of raise your hand with that, like digitally raise your hand through Zoom or write it in the chat, and the staff will let me know if you have any questions if I don't notice it, because I'm going to be sharing my screen for the most part. So here's how I go about it mostly. Let me now share the Ableton screen, which is where we want to spend our time here today. Not the most organized project that I've ever had, but I wanted to leave it like that just so we see the different samples that I picked and all that. It's not huge too, not too many channels. And I think the first place that I want to dive into is going to be the drums and percussion, because that's something that's maybe more intuitive and we can take a look at it easily first. So in order to have a good drum groove, right? What's our elements that we need? So maybe you can answer me in the chat. What are the main elements that we need in a good drum groove to make it happen sound wise, right? And yeah, I'm totally down to have this interactive. So if you want, you can write down there, what are the basic elements? All right, kick, snare, absolutely. Thank you, Surubi. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, but thank you so much. Yeah, I think kick, snare is the basic stuff, right? Kick on the 1 and 3, snare on the 2 and 4 is always a good idea if you want to have a rhythm, right? That beat that you want to start. So for me, starting out, what I do, I have sources. I didn't leave them here because they were really kind of making this whole thing visually unpleasant. But basically what I do, I take all the videos that I have, I split them into WAV files, and I kind of make them into what would be useful musically and what would be just useful visually, which is a whole other subject. We're only talking about the music today. And then I just drop them all into the Ableton and try to kind of, you see, I saw kind of categorize them. So I have pots, I have plating, other cashier, things that I thought would sound good, right? So I throw them all in, and then I start kind of cutting them and putting them together. And I figured the most bassy kind of kick-ish sound that I got there was from this pita box that they kept the pitas in, and they had me just like close and open it, and we captured the sound of that. Actually, I can probably show you that video specifically. Let me share my desktop for a second, and I think it's going to be cool to see that. So desktop 1. So this thing is the kick, is gonna be the kick. Nope, taking the time here. Let's see. Right, so we basically just opened and closed that pita box, and that was supposed to turn into a kick. Now, it didn't have to do a lot to really get that sound out of it, but I did have to make it louder, right? It's not really strong. I have to make it a little more apparent to become a kick. So this was the original sound here. And you can see that basically it's just like in the video, they just hit that pita box a few times, right? So you get, let me drag it along here. And you can see that it's just like these twice that we did it. What I did after that is I just cut it into smaller pieces because we don't want all the background noise as well, right? So let me solo that for a second and hear how it sounds now. Or let's strip all the effects down, which are not a lot in this case, and let's hear it. So this is it. All right, so basically it's getting close. It's not too far from being a kick, but the first thing that I wanted to do is compress it a little bit. And I use a lot of Ableton, just the stock plugins. I think they're great. I think they're light on CPU for the computer. And as you can see, I raised it quite a lot just to get that sound because it was pretty low in volume. And So that's a compressor. And if anyone wants to know a little bit about how a compressor works and don't know that, let me know and I can explain a little bit. And basically after that, I just have this frequency splitting rack that I made because I wanted to kind of split the lows and the highs and have some highs accentuated maybe, and without using just one EQ. I think in the beginning, I wanted to also add some distortion to the highs to make it more punchy, but I ended up not doing it. So I mainly used it for EQ. So in the equalizer here, I just raised a little bit of the highs and maybe I think I raised the volume, the gain of the low frequencies from here, because sometimes when you use an EQ, and you raise frequencies, it distorts them a little bit, especially in the stock plugins. They're not as quality as if you get something like Pro Q or something like that. I don't have Pro Q, okay? So I use these. So sometimes just splitting frequencies, and I can share this rack with anyone who wants it. Maybe we can facilitate that somehow later. If you split the frequencies and just have the gain on that lower frequency higher, you see this is all the frequencies that we're getting from the low end. If you just raise the volume there, that might be more successful in EQing it rather than pushing it with EQ. Sometimes that just works better. So that worked for me. I see a question. Is there a difference between compressor and a glue compressor? So generally speaking, they're all compressors. They work in a similar way. I think here what they were trying to do is imitate the work of a compressor called CL, something like a very famous vocal compressor. So just visually and maybe the way it's wired inside works a little different. For me, sometimes this one works better, sometimes the other works better. It's really nuances in the sound and in the way they work that makes the difference. But you see this one has, for example, very specific settings for attack, for release, and then the other compressor that you're referring to, Rahul, is this one. By the way, if you don't know, Command F is the best friend that you can have in Ableton Live. If you just hit Command F from anywhere, you can look up anything that you have on your computer. So instead of going into, plugins, look for the computer, look for the compressor, sorry, this and that, or look for a kick, you can just look kick and it throws everything that you have on your computer as kicks. And that's really useful. I found it. So this is the regular compressor. It has almost the same settings, the threshold, the out here is the makeup gain, right? But it just feels a little bit different, sounds a little bit different for me, but not really a huge difference. I see you're saying that its ideal application is a bus or the whole mix. Yeah, it really depends. It really depends. I feel like sometimes if you want to have it a little more analog sounding, then this one would work better. So that's all I did with the kick. It actually was enough. Sometimes I was surprised because sometimes it needs to go through a lot more processing, but that was enough for me. It just, yeah, let's hear it once again. Sounded enough to me for a kick. Now for the snare, I used a couple of sounds here. For example, there was some plates, okay, more plate. It's the plate hitting another plate that we had there. So if I solo the instruments, then I'm not heard. And then we had hummus to go. So I think that was just him putting hummus into the bowl. You saw that in the video as well. So this is this. So and then you just have to kind of arrange those things one after the other, right? So, and this is the first approach that I want to talk about today. There are two approaches, in my opinion, into sampling things. There is the one that's audio only, which you see here on the screen, right? We take a piece of audio, we split it up into the most interesting parts that you want to use, and then we play with it a little bit and throw it on the grid to fit the groove. Another option is to use a sampler, which we're going to see in a bit. And also, yeah, let me know if you have any more questions at any point. So the snare, basically what I wanted to do, let's look at the effects chain. We have a bunch of things this time. Okay, some of them are triggered later on in the song, right? So all of these are going to be triggered later on in places that I wanted to sound more heavy. I added some overdrive and and reverb, and we're going to look at that in a moment. But the basic stuff for me is always EQ out the noise. In these samples that we get from nature, city sound, city life, we get a lot of noise along, right? So one option is to use some kind of cleaning software to get those out, like RX by Isotope. But I don't have that one. So what I use is an EQ to cut lows and things that might kind of get in. And also I cut it time-wise to only fit that waveform, right? So if I just like, let's extend this and see what the whole video was about here. And you can see that there was a lot of just like things that are not useful because you're filming there for a while and you just want to get as much as you can, right? Let's hear this piece. So you hear a little bit of wind, right? Then you hear the guy just probably throwing some hummus in that plate, plating it, putting it aside. He doesn't really know, and I didn't want to really bother them too much into what would be musical for me. And then you got to kind of go in and chop those little pieces. So that's what I did here. Basically chopped all those kind of higher peaking sounds. And whoever has been dealing with music production for a little while, you can already see that these ones are the ones that kind of start looking more like a snare, like a type of a drum, right? They have a strong attack and a little bit of a decay here. And then you get these different sounds. And you got to make a groove out of them first, right? So I just made this kind of groove. And let's hear the kick and the snare here together to just see how I chopped them and made them into this little groove. Cool. So simple groove has some kind of variations into it. I think variation is super important in electronic music because it's not a drummer playing. So you gotta really keep things feeling alive when you do these things. So that's why I always try to have as much variation. And there's some more samples here for percussion and stuff like that I use to embellish it even more. But let's take a look at the effects change for the snare just to make it a little more shine a little more. So without the effects, what we get is this. And also, okay. So without the effects, this is what we get. I needed a little more punch. So I added the EQ. And in the EQ, what I love about the EQ in Ableton is that you can see visually what's happening. You can kind of pop up some things that you want to sound a little louder. Right. So somewhere around here, 255 hertz is where I wanted that. I heard that punch of these plates and I wanted to make that louder. So that made it kind of pop up a little more. Oops, someone's drawing on the screen here. I see. How did that happen? And then I wanted a compressor, same as the kick. Right. So that will add a little more punch to it. And the saturator here is really what you want to kind of make it a little more grungy, a little more distorted without having too much of it, right? So on and off, you don't hear a whole difference, but it does make a difference when it pops up in the mix. So you can see that the drive here is on like 1.7, not too much. Let's hear it with or without. So it doesn't make a whole lot of difference, but it just gives it that extra punch that we need for it to kind of come through the whole mix. By the way, it's pretty cold here, so there's like a boiler making noise behind me. Let me know if it's really bothering you guys, and I can just do the auto background fader thing. Let me know. Okay. And to keep going, and then later in the song, I want to just show you what happened to it next, because the automation actually brings on the overdrive towards the end, where I want it to be kind of more punchy. And now you can see we have all those effects kind of come in. And I have an overdrive here. I have a parallel reverb, and this one is actually an interesting one. So when I do these things, sometimes I want to put a lot of things at the same time and as parallel processing. And for those of you who don't know what that means, basically parallel processing means that we're going to have the dry signal that we had before, like just the snare as is, as we had it. And on top of that, we're adding another layer to the cake, which is going to be something maybe very different or very affected, right? Very full of effects. For example, this is how this one is going to sound only with that effects chain. Okay, so you're basically hearing that layer of, it's like very noisy. I felt like a snare should be a little more noisy. You know, they have usually those metal things underneath that kind of make it more snary. So I wanted to add that. And the way I did that, if you look at the chain, there's a lot of distortion, right? A lot of overdrive here. Also kind of gone towards the higher area of the frequencies. Then we have an effect that I really like. That's called erosion. Erosion basically just adds some noise to any sound that you have. Okay, so let's turn that on and off for a second to hear what that does. Right, so it really flattens the sound, makes it super smooth and noisy. And without the overdrive, also you'll hear how it doesn't do a lot. So it really adds a lot of that kind of high frequency, noisy thing that we want to have in a snare. After that, I cut all the lows and even more than before for the EQ because you really don't want more than that. We're going to have the dry signal coming in as well. So that's going to provide most of the punch. And this is only going to be that kind of almost like the microphone that you put underneath the snare and gives you that feeling of the hiss. All right. After that, I added an OTT, which is usually just, it's called OTT is meaning over the top. So it's just like very overly compressed kind of effect that really brings everything out in almost an exaggerated way. So I wouldn't just put it on anything, but when you do parallel compression like this or parallel processing, it's really nice to just bring out everything at once. Let's hear it with and without that. So you can hear that really flattens everything there, right? It's like it loses the punch, but that's exactly what I needed there. Okay, so that's why I used it. And then a saturator in the end just to flatten things a little bit more. Saturators can be used almost as limiters sometimes. I like putting them in the end of a channel strip a lot to kind of just flatten the sound, make sure that the peaks are not going too high. And sometimes when you deal with drums, especially kick and snare, you're going to hear a lot of peaks. They're going to have a lot of peaks, and then it might also clip in the master. Okay. And I hope everyone understands the terminology that I'm using. If not, feel free to ask questions. But basically you want to flatten it out a little bit. So I use the saturator a lot of times because it really doesn't make a difference in the sound. It's really transparent and really effective for that really low on CPU. You don't want to put a limiter on every channel that you have. So this was that, that's the snare. And that's how it would sound both with the dry and chain that I made. Right, so I kind of soloed each one of them separately. You could hear that both layers together create that punchy snare. So that's how that came about. Any questions so far? Anything that you really wanted me to go through? I just want to really, I'm here for you guys. So anything that's interesting for you, I'm down to open up and show. So feel free to just like type it in if you have anything. I can see the chat while I'm sharing the screen here. Apart from that, for the rest of the groove, what I did is just use some more percussion-y kind of stuff. So we had some, okay, there was a handle of the pot that he kind of threw all over the pot and kind of drained the water out of the chickpeas there. So I really liked that sound and made a little groove out of that. For this, I did have to quantize it. And quantization, for those of you who are newer to music production, means that, yeah, words sometimes it's quantization means that we take all the hits of a given melody and we put them on the grid of the song. So that means if we're in 4/4, then we want to kind of place them in the rhythm so it's not just random and floating around. So that's what I had to do with this one. Let's copy it aside and hear the original thing here. So when you go to do anything with an audio piece in Ableton, you have to hit warp. Once you hit warp, you can change it around and do some really cool stuff. So I want to just revert it to the unwarped sample and just hear what it used to be. There's not too much processing on this one. There was some auto pan that I'll show you later what I did with, but basically this is what it was. Right, and I mean, it was just him like hitting the pot with that little stick, and we saw that in the video as well. Now, in order to quantize that, what we want to do is hit warp, and it's gonna rewarp it, so that's fine. And then you get those little kind of arrows above the hits, because Ableton is smart, like I said, my favorite software, right? And it can really see those little hits, and then it can also quantize them and throw them in place, right? So if we want to just quantize that, basically you can hit Command U, and that's going to quantize it automatically. You can also hit Command Shift U, and it will bring up this window. Oh, why is this window not working at the moment? That's weird. Okay. Should bring up that window. Maybe if we do quantize settings, there we go. I hope you can see this. And then you can choose your settings in which to quantize to, which can be current grid or 8 notes or 16 notes. And I think 8 notes would be good here. And you can also have the amount. So like if you don't want it to sound too robotic, you can actually hit it at like 80%, and that will not make it, it'll make it still kind of human, right? Then you hit OK, and it should quantize it to place. If it doesn't do it the way you want it, you can always just click and drag from those yellow marks and throw it wherever you want. So that's what I did for that. I also used something that I really like using for drums, especially when it's a noisy background. I used, so here you have the warping algorithms for any given audio, okay? There's beats, tones, textures, and some complex stuff. All right. I don't want to get into it too much, but basically the beats will just keep each beat sounding just as is and cut the silence in between those beats so that you can kind of separate them or make them closer, right? So basically when we warp something, when we time stretch a piece of audio, it can sound really bad if we don't do it the right way. It can sound really kind of metallic or something like that through the other algorithms. Sometimes you want that in music, right? But for this part specifically, if I was going to do, say, tones and really stretch this out, this might not sound good. Right? You can hear a lot of that kind of residue of that sound being stretched. So we want to use beats for it to be short and right when we hit that quote unquote snare. And once you do beats, the other nice thing that you get is that you can have those beats also shorten. So this little number here, I hope it's visibly nice for you guys, basically mutes the audio right after the hit in an amount that we determine. So it starts at 100. 100 is not muting anything, right? So it would sound like this. And you can hear a lot of the noise before and after. And once you get that shorter, you get a really nice and clean hit. So for cleaning that background noise, this is super useful. Just clean in a minute, right? Notice that again. So clean. And now I'm going to put up the noise level back. And you just get so much more noise with that. I hope that's... I hope you can hear that through Zoom. I know it's like through the internet and everything, but hopefully the quality is good enough for you to hear that. And if not, let me know. I can probably tweak a few things here so we're able to hear it. Okay, so then you got to quantize. You got it kind of shortened to the way you want. And from there on, it's all about just making the groove happen and arranging it in the way that you want it. So this is the arrangement that I had here just to make it a little musical and fun. And in the end here, I felt like, okay, I want something a little bit different, a little more kind of electronic music sounding. So these little things here, I actually pitched these two duplicates of this little part. I pitched it up. And once you do warp, it'll leave it in place just as is. And you can use transpose to make the pitch of anything go up or down. Let's hear an example of that. So these specific ones were higher in 15 semitones. Okay, so. And you can really play around with that and have so many different sounds come out of it, which is really nice. I love using that to kind of vary things around. And then the other sound that I had in the end here that you noticed is this one right in the end. Okay, so this one I actually on purpose used a different algorithm for the warping, which made it sound kind of stretched in a little bit of a nasty way, but a good type of nasty. That's what I call it, right? So it kind of sounds stretched and almost as if you hit a drum and somehow kind of drag that hit along. And I really like that sound for little fills, for little variations. So this is how this one sounds. And you can see that it's on tones here instead of beats. And you can adjust the grain size for it to sound one way or another. Let me give you an example of that. So here's what I did. And I'm going to change the grain size so you can hear that a little bit. So the bigger the grain size, basically grains are like little bits of audio, and the bigger they are, the more it's going to sound kind of chopped and repeated. The smaller it is, the more it's going to sound kind of robotic and maybe almost have this type of note value to it. After that, kind of kept going with the same groove. I like doing these little grooves and groupings of, say, 4 bars, and then you can repeat it because it's kind of varied enough, in my opinion. But you can go ahead and go crazy with those things. I just decided to use some more elements here for the percussion. So let's just hear the whole drum part and see how it sounds all together and how it came about. Basically, the rest of the things here were similarly processed. Some EQ, you can see I cut the lows on a lot of these because we got a lot of wind. And that's something to notice when you do the sampler to city. Make sure the wind is not in there. And if you can have on your mic some type of a wind cover, that's always good. But if it's there, always cutting it with the EQ is a good idea. Sometimes very extremely, and sometimes we don't need to do a lot. But you can see that everything here is pretty much similar to each other. Okay, let's hear the whole drum patterns here. All right, so this was basically the whole arrangement for the drums. And the more elements you use, the better it's going to sound and the more full it's going to sound, almost like a percussion section, right? Now, this is one that I really like that I think I can maybe contribute some more tips here through this one. This one was where he made that, if you remember the video, he kind of crushed some garlic and some I'm getting a message. Volume from the playing is too low. Oh yeah, I can definitely increase the volume. Yeah, I got rid of my mastering chain because it was really kind of taking the CPU up. Let me know if this is a better volume.
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, we'll keep it at that volume. Also, once the rumbly boiler stops working, I'll do the original sound, and that might help as well. Okay, so for this sound, so he was crushing something, and it made some really unique sounds, kind of swirly sounds, if to put it in any way. Let's hear that just soloed by itself. Right, so it has that kind of weird sound to it that I really like. So once again, just cutting and arranging things, right? And I can go into more depth into that if you guys want, but I think that It's pretty much the same way that I went with it earlier. But something cool that I used with this later on in the song, and I think another really useful tool. So for anyone who's writing down, right, we had erosion, which is great for adding some noise, and frequency shifter is something that I really like using. This one can be very good in varying sounds, and especially percussive sounds, kind of make them go in different directions without compromising the sound or without compromising their timing. So it's kind of similar to the way we deal with the audio itself with the warping, but just in a more automatic way that sometimes is way easier. So check it out. This is how it affects this sound. So it just made it way higher. I felt like at that point I had so much information that I didn't want to take too much place in the mix. So this is how it works. The frequency shifter here has a frequency. When it's on 0, it's not doing anything, right? Hard to find the 0 point here. Oh, actually, maybe it might be 100 hertz where it doesn't do anything. And then from there on, you can go lower or higher, and that's really going to shape the sound differently. Let's try to play with that a little bit.
Sorry
Right.
to interrupt you, but it's just, I think the volume drops after the first bit every time. So the first bit's kind of clear, and then
I see. So I need to just turn original sound on. You might hear the rumble now from behind me. I hope that's not gonna bother as well, but let me try that. So original sound on. Well, let's share it again. Let me know if this is better.
yeah.
Is it better or still doing it? Yeah, okay. Ah, awesome. I'm sorry that you guys had to listen to all this. I hope it didn't kind of go away earlier, but yeah, this should be good. All right. So this tool, very useful. So it just changes the sound, changes the pitch of it. It has 2 modes, shift and ring mode. This time I used ring mode. I just felt it was really cool to use that. And then let me just demonstrate the different options that you can do with it. I'm gonna solo it, so you're not gonna hear me. So I'm just gonna play around. Notice what I do here on the frequency shifter. Okay, so you can really make anything sound like anything, right? Any drum almost can sound like a hi-hat if you turn the frequency shifter up enough, right? It's super cool. Or it can sound almost like a snare sometimes if you shift it down. Now, the coolest thing about this is you can also have an LFO change it automatically. An LFO is a low frequency oscillator. That means that it's some type of a waveform that goes really slow or fast. You determine the rate, and that can actually change any other element of the effect going up and down automatically. So let's check that out. You basically want to add the LFO amount from here. You have a shape, so it can be very square, very smooth, or just go like a triangle up and down. It can also be random. I use that a lot in my productions, just random, just let it do whatever it wants. And then after the amount, you have the rate. So that means how fast is that wave going. We're gonna go with a classic shape with a sine shape in the beginning just to hear it. Let's see how that sounds. So you can hear that now it goes down and up, right? Right? Really kind of in a very unique way. And you can make that faster. So it really makes you do some crazy things. So I really like this one. Very useful tool. And also the other thing that I like that I used here is the auto pan. Another really useful tool. Now, auto pan is cool if you have a mono sound, and most of these, I think actually this one might have been stereo, but I wanted to move around, and I'm not sure how it's heard for you guys in the stereo field here, but that's a really nice way to kind of have something sound stereo without having it stereo. Basically, an auto pan just does the panning change automatically, again, in a rate that you want to choose and an amount that you want to choose. So you have the amount here, and you can actually visually see how extreme it's going to be, and then the rate, right? And phase means how close the right and left ears are going to be. If the phase is all together, it's just going to go up and down in volume, which is another thing that's useful here that I'm going to show you in a minute. Cool. So that basically just kind of varies that around a little bit. And the faster I go with that, the faster it's going to go between the ears. I do have the audio on stereo here, so hopefully you can hear that. Let me know if you can't. You should be hearing it kind of traveling between one ear and another. And if you're not, at least you're aware of this tool and you can imagine it for now and try it later. Yeah. So that's it about percussion. Any questions about the percussive elements? I think I pretty much covered most of what I wanted to show you there. Let me know if there are any questions about this for 1 minute, or about anything. If you guys want to ask a question, you can raise your hand with a little button there or put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. I like talking about these things, so that's no problem at all. Okay, I'm getting a question from Abhishek. Did this give you more freedom rather than using a drum rack and loading samples into it? That's a great question, Abhishek. Thank you for that. So, for those of you who are new to Ableton, there's many options to sample a lot of things. And one way that Abhishek is talking about here is a drum rack. So if you have a drum rack, you basically load samples individually to this kind of instrument, and then you can play them live or use MIDI to really notate those. So for me, yes, when I do live stuff, you know, I sometimes do my launchpad things. I always use a drum rack because that's very useful, and I can hit something and play live, and it will always be available for me. But here, I felt like I wanted more freedom for effects and more freedom for playing with the audio and with the sounds individually. And that's something that you lose once you put it into MIDI, right? And you have to go through a lot to change a sound if it's through MIDI, whereas here you saw these little breaks that I did and fills where, oh, you know what, I want this specific snare now to be stretched a little more. So it's so simple to do that when everything's there, everything is visual in the audio, and that's why that was my choice specifically for that. And for the most part, it is my choice. Even in my more kind of just own compositions, I like having a lot of the percussion and drums in audio because I can just play with it so fast. I can reverse it, I can stretch it, I can squeeze it, I can double it, you know, so it's really fun and really intuitive and easy to use in that way. I hope that answers the question. All right, so, oh, there we go. We have another question coming in. Thank you, Shyamal. All right, how much must the ceiling of the master limiter while mastering so the song doesn't distort? Okay, so distortion and clipping, right? That's a big one. And yeah, obviously the project is now clipping, quote unquote, because I bumped up the volume by a lot. You don't want to do that when you export your song, because that might have distorting consequences. The ceiling, nowadays I put the ceiling at minus 0.3 dB even. I used to do it, you want to not have it at 0 first of all, because when you go out after that and you put it on streaming services or, you know, YouTube, Spotify, or even if you turn it into an MP3, or just I upload videos to Instagram and they start clipping already if you put it on 0, because when you convert audio files into different audio files, then something in there just makes it distort more. The interpretation of that 0 is a little different probably. I don't know a ton about it, but I just keep it under, for sure, under minus 0.1. And nowadays, even for things that I send to any streaming services, I do minus 0.3, just to be on the safe side. I don't want anything to distort. I hope that answers the question. On the other hand, you can have a lot of compressor going into that, right? So that's only the ceiling, but you can still squish the song quite a bit. Not that that's always what you want to do, but you can bring up the volume quite a bit and to have it sound pretty loud. Don't forget that the perceived volume is the volume over time and not necessarily the peaks, right? So the ceiling doesn't have to be much, but if you compress everything a lot, it will sound louder because it's louder over time. I hope that helps. All right, for anyone else, let me know also if this all sounds like gibberish to you. I'm all down to also get into a little bit more of basics, so feel free to ask. And if, yeah, I hope you guys are understanding everything that I'm talking about. And if not, feel free to ask me. I'm gonna keep going now to risers really quick because I think risers are really cool. And this is where we're getting into the sampler area rather than the audio area. So a little bit more MIDI there. Let's take a look. All right, so let's hear this riser. Risers are just a very basic thing that happens in electronic music. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, this is this type of sound. Let me play it for you. So basically this thing that kind of goes up in volume and in pitch slowly to kind of create tension before we hit like a drop in electronic music or something like that. Let me, I want you to hear that in context of the song as well and how it works with the other instruments. So this is right where the melody starts coming in. Right, so it's that building tension kind of effect. And the way I like doing that with samples, and I actually do it in my compositions as well, I just built a little rack here that you can use any sample to make anything rise or fall if you want. But so here's a cool thing. No matter what you use, and this was the Drink Fridge 2 video, okay? So let's actually check out what that was. Drink Fridge 2 in my videos. Let's see. Drink D. Drink Fridge 2. Are you guys able to see the whole screen? Okay, cool. Yeah, I saw some nodding there. So this is the sample that it's taken from. Doesn't have anything to do with the riser in any way. I think he was trying to help me and make some beat out of it, or like hit it in a certain rhythm or something like that. But what you can do with a sampler, all right, and this is specifically yeah, sampler. You can also do it with simpler, but it was easier for me. It's two versions that you have in Ableton. So basically what you want to do is insert any type of sound into your sampler, and then find a little piece that just sounds like noise. Okay, it doesn't even have to be a note or anything, right? So if let me try to play on the keyboard with this, and yeah, so let me take it back a step just so we can hear how it sounds originally. So very low sound, and it just sounds like this. Okay, and if I choose a different place here, it might sound different, right? It's basically a hit. I think it's one of the hits that he hit the door with, and you want to choose a range that's really narrow. The smaller range you choose, the more you're gonna get a note, because it's almost like catching a waveform and creating a synth out of it, which is what I did after that with the basses. But here we go. So it just repeats that little piece of audio like a million times a second, right? Or million is a little much, but maybe like 10 times a second or something like that. And the smaller it is, the more we can kind of use it as a note, right? So this is what we chose, what I chose here. And all you need to add to that, because right now it's static, right? It just keeps going in the same way, apart from these little effects that I added later. What you want to add next is a pitch, right? You want the pitch to rise. And in sampler, if you go to the pitch oscillator section here, you can choose pitch envelop. And while you click that, you can choose that slope for the pitch to rise. And this is where the secret is. So you have to make that happen, right? Click that button so it's on. You have to use the amount. It usually is on 0, I believe, in the beginning. As long as you don't have the amount, it's not gonna work. So sometimes I forget that, like, why is this not working? And then I see, oh yeah, amount, of course. So the amount has to be maximized for us to get the most of the riser. And then what you wanna do is you basically stretch the attack of the rise as much as you can. I think the top here is 20 seconds. So you wanna go as much as you can. And then what's happening is it's just gonna rise in pitch once you kind of hit that first note. And this is how it's gonna sound. And the faster you make the attack, the faster it's gonna rise. So we can make it like, I don't know, a second long, and you'll see that it really jumps up. Right, and then it stops at some certain point. So you want, if you're making a riser, you can make it a little longer, I think. But if you're making like some type of an effect, it can be really short. Like, let's do this. Let's do. Right, we can make some interesting noises here that actually have a certain note. So that's even cool. You can make music with it, actual like chords or something. Right, now that's the most refined, we would have to do some processing on it, but basically you can already see the potential here with those samplers and what you can do with it. So for this, we used it as a riser, and then you can go back to the sample too and check if maybe there's another place that would sound better or anything like that. With the filter here, I don't think I had any filter envelope, but you can use that as well to kind of open up the sound gradually. I did have an attack, so in the global section here, you can also make the attack of the noise itself a little longer so that it doesn't come out straight out in full volume. This is with 0 milliseconds of attack. It just hits right away, but I wanted it to kind of sneak in, so you want to make that attack a little longer. You can do it by either dragging this or just, you see attack here, and this will just make it longer or shorter. So this really kind of creeps in now and makes it a little... Cool. So that's that. I also, after this, just to make it a little more special, and you know, these sounds might, again, sound a little kind of dry, so you want to kind of make them as interesting as you can. So let's take a look at the effects that I used here. Let's take them off for a second and then bring them back on and see what each one of them did. So this would be just a dry thing without anything. Already sounds like a riser, but it's not affected enough in my opinion. It's not special enough and doesn't kind of have that quality of movement that we're looking for in electronic music, once again, because we're not playing live, so we have to kind of accommodate for that. So the first thing that you can add here is LFO, and I just talked about it earlier with a frequency shifter. LFO is once again a low frequency oscillator, so it makes that waveform that can control basically anything else right now in the same instrument, and you can have a bunch of those here, so you can play around with these things a lot. For this one, I just chose to use the pan, and there's a percentage here for how much you want it to affect anything. So you have pitch, filter, volume, and I wanted to just play around a little bit with the left and right. So I used the pan, and then it's just gonna make it go from left to right a little bit. If I make that extreme, you can definitely hear it traveling from one ear to the other now. That's all I used here. Then I went to the auto filter just to cut the lows. I think I thought of bringing that up as we go with the riser, but I decided not to do that because it was just high frequency enough. So I just left it as is, cut the lows. But you could potentially do something like this, like have a little bump there and automate it to go up with your riser. So it would sound something like this. You hear that kind of little peak there rising, and that can add a lot actually to your riser. So that's pretty cool. Maybe I would have done that if I did it today. The next thing that I added was a phaser. Phaser just makes things sound really spacey and plays with the it's kind of doubling the signal, the audio signal, and making it in multiple ways and playing around with it. So I really like the way that it affects this type of sound. Let's hear that without and with. So you hear a little bit of that kind of a wavy kind of a feeling to it. And I didn't do it extremely, but you can play with it and make it much more extreme if you want. So here. You can go crazy with this. It can really sound really cool. And once again, we have an LFO on this, so you can really make anything automated and automatically just moving around, make a lot of movement with these things. And once again, that's like the most crucial thing for me when I work with these things, just make movement, right? And lastly, just some reverb to make it a little more sound, a little more wet and blend with the other things. And you can hear that tail after it kind of staying there. So that's basically it. If you have any questions about this one, please let me know. But I just put one note there and then I added another note midway, because if you add two notes, it's just going to make it more, I guess, heavier and just have some more volume to it and more impact to it. So that was the first part of the riser. Probably sounding way different than what it was originally, but that's cool. We played around with it a little bit and that's nice. And other than that, I think I just used this salad machine audio, which I played around with a little bit. Also, an interesting thing to see here is that originally it's just a noisy sound. Let's hear it. Right, so basically this is I don't know if it was apparent in the video, but it's just a salad machine. You put a cucumber above, you do this kind of rolling thing, and it comes out in cubes. Really cool. I want that in my home. I asked him how much it cost, and he said it's, I don't know, like $700 for something like that. So okay, thank you. I'm just gonna keep cutting my veggies. But very, very unpleasant noise, very not musical, right? So first thing that you want to do is EQ, right? That's like the first sculpting that you do to these, almost like, you know, taking a chisel and kind of sculpting a sculpture here. So sonic wise, you just take what you want out of it. In this case, I wanted this kind of high mid range. First of all, cutting all the low frequencies there and just leaving this. So you can hear it automatically eliminates all that background noise that we had there that's really unpleasant. Saturator, just to give it a little drive. This time it really boosted the volume nicely, so it really did affect it. And the most fun thing about this one is the auto pan, because right now it doesn't have any meaning in the song, not rhythmically, not musically. But if you use the auto pan that we've met earlier as something to switch between the left and right panning in ears, this time if you put the phase on 0, then you can have it almost like an automation for your volume for the sound. And I automated that to come in and become more and more apparent as we go. Oh, no, actually, no, it was just straight away. I just applied it once it's got in. So sorry about that. Okay, but yeah, basically the effect is still there. You can see that it kicks in here, and let's see how it sounds with that. Right, so now we have some type of noise, but it's rhythmically aligned with the song and it has that offbeat feeling. So I felt like that could really help the whole overall kind of rising feeling of the song at that point. And this is how it sounds together with everything else. You can maybe kind of hear it now. Oh, rising goes crazy. So almost actually unapparent, but it really added some kind of emotion to it and kind of drags everything along. Other than that, I just have this little piece of percussion that I copied, and then I used the pitch tool, the transpose here, the transposition over here through the clip transposition to kind of raise that in pitch as well and use it almost as a riser. So this is the other way to do this, right? You have the sampler way, and this is the audio way to do it. If you have a clip, what I did is I believe I just took these, doubled them, and then I kind of glued them together into one clip. You can do that by doing hitting Command J or Control J. Sorry, I think that was missed. And then it turns it into one whole block. Once you have that, you hit warp, and you can actually choose some attributes here during the clip that you might want to change. So I chose clip, transposition, and you can see that kind of ramp going up, and that made it sound this way. So once again, just contributing to that kind of raising kind of feeling. All right. If there are any questions about this, let me know. Otherwise, I want to keep moving. Time is running by pretty fast. So I think the last element that I want to show you here is kind of similar to what we did, but basically how to make notation, because I think that's probably the hardest thing to do with these samples. Percussion, drums, we can hear it at pretty much leaving it as is, but how do we sample things to turn into notes? And that's where this whole section comes up. And how do you actually do that without using virtual instruments? Actually, kind of in a similar way, I found, like the riser. So Salad Machine, again, it's our star of the night, I guess. I realized it has some low frequencies to it. So I really wanted to try and turn it into a sub. So watch how much I need to zoom in here. Basically, you could almost say like it's not really a sample from there, but just like this tiny bit. Still legal for my boundaries that I put for myself because it was taken from the original audio. But basically, I was looking for something that sounds a little bassy, and I found that the low frequencies in that Salad Machine thing almost made a note. And sorry, once you get close enough to the waveform, you're gonna get an actual note. So that's what I got. Can you believe this was a Salad Machine a moment ago? Basically, let's try to stretch it out and see what it was before that. Just a piece of noise, right? But if you lower it enough, and if you bring it close enough to the waveform, you're gonna start getting something that sounds more like a note. Hear that? It's almost like if you guys are dealing with some synths, then yeah, this is like a really cool thing. Yeah, thank you for that, Surbi. The closer you get, it's almost like playing a synth. You can do the opposite if you have a synth that you're playing in and you're playing really low notes. It almost sounds like the note is separated into kind of like sounds like a truck a little bit. So this is exactly the opposite of that, right? We're starting with this weird noise that's repeating, right? And you got to make sure, I'm sorry that I didn't mention that it's looped, right? Because that's what's going to make it happen. If it's not looped, if it's just played once, it's just a piece of noise. But once it's starting to be looped and we close in on it, we start to get a note value. All right, the next important thing is to understand what is that note that we're getting, because that's going to let us actually play around with it later and actually play on a keyboard or make melodies with that. Yeah, it does sound like a bass guitar, absolutely. And that's what I was going for here. I wanted a sub, which is something that's kind of challenging to find as a sound in samples, right? This is the only way that I actually got to do something like that. And sometimes it doesn't work. Some sounds just don't work, and you just have to find the sweet spot. Like if I would search otherwise here, maybe it wouldn't work, right? Or it was kind of soft. So you got to look for that sweet spot and go low enough to kind of get that little sound. And basically what I use after that is the tuner, just a simple tuner. I play a note, I play the C note on my keyboard here. I just have this like tiny keyboard. I play C, and I want to match C, right? That's basically what I want to do. So now that C is actually being a B, right? Because that's after we change the sound, it might have changed a little bit. So what we want to do is we go here to controls, and this is simpler, by the way. It's not sampler, it's simpler. Oops, changed it to sampler by mistake. Simpler is just an easier version, more like less options than sampler, but sometimes that's what you want to use if you don't want to do anything complex. You go to controls, and here you can find transposition and detune. And in there, we can actually choose the note that we want it to be. When we hit C, we want it to be C, right? So I hit C, it's B right now, so that means I have to take it up by half a step. So now it's gonna be C. And I use the detune that goes by sense, really kind of accurate, to have it fall as close as I can to that middle dot. So I just brought it up a little bit, and now it's like super accurate. So now I know, right? I can play something and it will be music. And that's it. That's basically the most of what you want to do to capture a sound and do that. After that, if you wanted to leave it as a sub, which is what I did here, then I didn't add a little bit of this to overdrive here, so, and a lot of compression. Without that, this is what it sounded like, right? So I compressed a lot. You can see that it's really compressed here. Added some overdrive in the end, and that's how I got this sound. After that, I think I used the same sound to make the other basses, but this time I just let it kind of go a little more wild and a little more distorted. So you get these kind of synths. You can basically make a lead out of it, you can make a bass out of it, you can make anything. Once you have that kind of raw material, it's up to you with what you want to do with it. So I added a reverb, I added OTT after the reverb, which makes the reverb really pop out. So here's without anything here. Reverb. You can make that huge if you want, right? And OTT, the over-the-top compressor that we used earlier, and you can actually dial it so that you don't use it fully. You can use percentage here on the right, and that will just determine how much of it do you want in your sound, and just pushes it, squishes it completely, which is not always desirable, but in this case, this is what I wanted. So just brings the reverb out. Sounds like very EDM-y, but it really worked for me in this specific place where I wanted just to reinforce that bass line. Right, so we have this sub there that's separated and that's kind of isolated, and then we have the upper layer of the bass that gives us the other side of that whole thing. And yeah, this was once upon a time a salad machine, right? And I really love how these things can transform. After that, it's just about adding some more cool effects to it. So an arpeggiator is something really useful that you can use if you're not familiar with that. This is what it can just double a note or a few notes. If you put a chord in your MIDI, it will just play them automatically in a set that you determine. So you can go up and down, converge, diverge, random. I just used it on a single note line, so I just doubled it in the amount that I wanted, in the rate that I wanted. In this specific place, it's 16th notes, and also kind of changes as we go. Let's see what I did there in the automation. Oh, so I had this little point where I wanted it to go, I think, in like 32 notes. Let's hear that for a second. Had that little effect of which is just by doing the rate here, and the gate is gonna tell you how short or long the note is gonna be, like this. So just another nice way of playing with this with the note length without really having to cut things in the MIDI itself, but just use an arpeggiator to kind of tweak it. After that, to get that kind of more synthy sound, I used my only non-Ableton plugin for this workshop, which is Manipulator. once again, not sponsored or anything like that. Super recommend you this. This is such a cool tool for sound design, and I think really underrated. It's by Polyverse and Infected Mushroom, and it just made the sound totally cool. Listen to it with or without. Basically added a lot of depth to it, some kind of phasing, and it just makes things really cool. You can play with the octaves, you can play with the pitch, stereo sound, and have a lot of options here. Let's just, if you just hear a few patches here. So you can really kind of mangle with your sound and make it really nice and different, right? And that's what we want here. We want some variations. Yeah, the last big. Yeah, so this one was just like super compressed. Used the manipulator as well. I used some distortion on it as well. Oh, actually another outer plugin, but you can use overdrive or any distortion from Ableton as well. That will work well. Just wanted to kind of get that kick along with the distorted guitar towards the end, and that's how I did it. So manipulator, distortion, same sample. So same sample here, went for the sub, went for the bass above the sub, went for the arpeggiator, and for that almost kind of lead sounding sound that we had there, and kind of varied along the whole thing wherever I wanted some more power or less power, and so on. Apart from that, I had another little MIDI thing here that was a bell. It was just a little bell that they had a little kind of I don't know how you call that, just for like the dips. It was made out of metal, and he just threw it at the wall and made this nice bell sound. So for this one, I actually only needed to sample the bell sound, right? We didn't really make a synth out of it. You just take the bell. Let me play that for you. Right, and this is a low octave, but yeah, so this is more close to what it was. And you can see that the note kind of fluctuates, but I try to find the middle area as much as I can and make it stable. So for example, this is close enough to a C, right? And then just some reverb on it, some overdrive. The manipulator comes in at some point. You can see I use it widely on these things. Frequency shifter at some point, and some delay, which just makes it sound more like a real instrument rather than just like a sample, right? This sounds like this. And then along with all the other instruments, it just adds some more depth to the whole thing. All right. Oops, sorry. All right. So this is mostly what I wanted to show you about this specific project. I would love to answer any other questions if you have in general about production, about this specific project, anything that I can help you with regarding Ableton music production tips. I can say that other than the production stuff here, I think something else that you want to consider always is the composition, right? So basically, how do you outline the whole thing? What's the arrangement gonna look like? Once you gather those little sounds, then you can think, okay, I have some good percussion sounds, I have a bass sound, I have a bell sound, let's make a musical idea with it. Or maybe you're inspired by some of the sounds that are already in there to make something musical. And basically, that's how you kind of start building the whole song. I have a question here. Out of curiosity, did you edit the video also in Ableton? Surby, thank you for that. No, I edited the video in Premiere. I'm not that much of a pro in editing video. I don't know what quality you would rank that video. What was important for me is just to match the things that you hear musically. And I'm not sure if in this project it's gonna happen in that way, because it might be focused more on the music and then the video might just portray something related to that. But either or, yeah, I use Premiere for that. And for me, it was just like I wanted to really see the things that you hear so that it kind of matches what you hear. Yeah. All right, Saurav, in regards to this project, how you came up with the song itself. Right, so, it was 2 years ago, so I'm not absolutely remembering exactly how it came about, but I'm pretty sure the first thing that I did is create the groove. And I thought, okay, how can I make it kind of go with the visuals as well? I wanted to start with just having like someone creating that hummus plate, so I started with those kind of sounds and developed the groove. After that, I was trying to find what I can do in terms of melodic and harmonic instruments, and that's where I was able to come up with the sub and the basses and the bell. And I thought, okay, if you have a bell, I was trying to think what kind of like what kind of a melody would be interesting or nice to have with that. And I think what I had in my head is that Tokyo Drift melody, that little thing from, I don't know, the movie from 2000 something. And that's what it reminded me of, that little bell sound. So that just inspired me to have this type of melody. And from there on, I think what's important, if to talk about the elements that you want to have in your composition, if it's an electronic thing and it's a rhythmic thing, I think just have enough variation between the parts where you have a theme and you kind of make it develop over time. I think that's the most important thing, right? So if you look at the contour of the whole piece, you have the introduction of the groove here, right? And after that, you have a little bit of like a bass notes coming in this section. Sorry. Right? Starting you hear that little bass kind of coming in, and it's I'm pretty sure it's automated with volume here to kind of rise as we go. Yeah, here we go. So it kind of rises, and you get that little sound introduced, right? So that's kind of a place where we have like an interlude, or like introducing the sound and like with that riser effect, and then you have the main portion of it, which is also developing by itself. So I think I first came up with this melody, and then I kind of cut it down and eliminated those to make it less developed in the beginning. So you don't have to always go from the beginning to end. You can also have like the final piece that you want to show, and then cut it down into something like this. And that's basically just the melody with deleted notes that I didn't want there. So that's like a nice, I think, a way to go about it if you don't have too many ideas, right? And you just want to make like one idea go and work. I think that's the way to do it. If there aren't any more questions, I would love to maybe just try something live on the spot and see what we can go. What we can do with that. How much time do we have? We have enough time. 7 minutes is what we have, right? Until we have to be done. Right.
Yep. You have 7 minutes, 10 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So challenge. All right, let's take like 5 minutes to make something cool. So actually, I downloaded some of the sounds that finalists sent us, which are really cool. Guys, I really like the things that you came up with. I really like what you wrote. I really like what you were collecting. So this is from Rahul. Let's see. Let's make a new project here. Or you know what? I think it might be easier to just delete everything here because I have my mic there already and all that. Just get everything out. Okay. And let's have a new track. Let's check out this sound. So we have Idli Sellers and we have Funeral Band. Wow, this is interesting. Let's hear the Funeral Band for a sec. Cool. So actually a very musical piece. That's interesting because we didn't really deal with anything like that yet. Let's see what we can do with it. So first of all, thank you for sending these sounds, and I hope they'll be useful for you guys as well. I would say because it's so nice and like musical, we can probably chop it up and do some cool stuff with it in that sense. And it's also probably a musical piece that's connected to itself. So okay, so let's say I can chop this, put it aside for a second. All right, let's take this piece. I don't have time. I like this one. Oh, nice. The crows were helping out. I like this too. So I'm just choosing some hits. And let's see what we have. We have like 4 or 5 things here. Huh. I'll separate these two. And now what I'm left with is just a bunch of like cool notes, right? And I can start just playing around with them and make something nice. Let's hear the metronome here too. Okay, so maybe let's make it a little slower. So let's double that. And let's maybe take a little chop from here. Okay, maybe something like that. So we have a little melody here, right? Something we can work with. I want this note to be a little earlier. Yeah, and then you can start warping things here and playing with that. So maybe I want to kind of warp that into something more interesting. Ooh. So. And if you start doubling that, you're going to hear that it's starting to sound somewhat melodic. And of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done with this. EQ, and a lot of things that we talked about today. But basically, this could be a beginning of something. And maybe this one can be a different note. Nice. Maybe this one needs to be a little varied. Ta-dun, 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 ta-dun. And maybe we can put this all together into one piece and raise it with raise it in pitch like we did earlier. Let's see, transposition, right? I have to kind of bring this up and randomly just a little extreme, but cool. All right, so yeah, here's what can happen in 5 minutes with a little sample. Cool. Hopefully this was really helpful for you guys. Is there any more questions? Oh, thank you guys. Thank you. I think I hope this was useful for you. I hope you got some really useful tips for your productions, for your music. And I'm really looking forward to hear what the finalists have for us and working with you guys, creating something really nice, portraying your cities, which I don't know as much as you. So I'm really eager to hear what your cities sound like and how this whole project is going to come about. I want to say huge thanks for the whole MAP staff here for having me here. I think this was really great. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, Annette, for connecting us. Thank you, Kamini, for just arranging the whole thing. And I know it was quite hectic, the whole organization of this, and I think we made it happen really well. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Yo. Just echoing everyone on chat, this is incredible. And I think that the live demonstration was crazy, as somebody said. It was incredible to watch. So thank you so much for giving us a lot of time this morning. And we are also looking forward to see what all the finalists come up with. And thank you for everyone who stayed back and engaged. Thank you, Deepika, again.
Let's take a selfie together before we go. Upload it to social media. You guys, if anyone has a camera that they're using and want to kind of reveal themselves, let's click a little photo here just for to keep it there and to upload to our socials. I'm gonna wait a minute for everyone to show up. There you go. Nice. Let's do it. Oh, too dark. All right. Thank you guys for being here. Hope to hear from all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.